Hello, guys. Today I will be reviewing a video game called Wild Guns for the Super Nintendo, which, as you know, was a gaming console released in about 1991, decades ago, by Nintendo from Japan. I am Alex Julian, and I am a reviewer and also a critic. And let's be honest, if video game companies keep encouraging their customers to have bad manners for video games, maybe we should just stop playing video games and have bad manners without them. Would that work? Would it work to have so many bad manners and, you know, refuse to buy video games? Refuse to buy games, refuse to buy controllers, refuse to buy consoles, and maybe even worse, steal video games. Right? Oh, yeah, sure. Video game companies encourage bad manners way too much. And Wild Guns may be something of an example of that counter extreme. I mean, video game companies just seem to continue to promote violence in their video games and fighting and conflict and arrogance and vulgarity. And it gets to the point that I may have to say to these video game companies, is it actually possible for you to actually turn peace into a video game instead of violence? I mean, I think peace would be a lot more useful for us in terms of business and customer and business relationship. Because if businesses keep encouraging their customers to have bad manners in any way, shape, or form, the customers can then betray the businesses. And the customers can quit being customers and turn themselves into criminals. And so for that reason, I think businesses in video games, and just businesses in general, need to be careful about encouraging bad manners. Because good manners are useful for a lot of things in business. It's with good manners that we pay the price, that we understand the taste, that we appreciate the flavor, that we enjoy the splendor of innocence, that we have honesty and satisfaction with our positive and productive communications. Without those good manners, where does that bring video games? What if every video game in the future becomes something like Grand Theft Auto? I don't think that would be very wise for the future of video games. I mean, sure, maybe in the past, like maybe in the late 1970s and early 1980s, it was fine to have some shooter video games with violence, such as Space Invaders and Galaga and um, 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 Pac-Man and those kinds of things. But here's the problem. When more and more video games encourage way too many bad manners, and when we get too much display of violence and just too much display of fighting and conflict and drama and enemyship and everything, where does that bring us? I mean, I would like to play Wild Guns for the Super Nintendo and think of it as something of a treat or something of a mild amusement for the science fiction of the Western flick. But then again, it could be on the temper that I may be biased about it. Because after all, wouldn't it still not be peace to have a funny, violent game? I mean, and there's these kinds of things where it's like, in games like, there's often a shooting game or a role-playing game or a history game or a reality game or something, and we get exposed to all this arrogance and all this tension and anger and some ignorant gamers in California may even doubt my claim that wisdom can really benefit them. I would remind these gamers, have you ever thought that maybe with wisdom, that maybe you can make more money with video games, and that you could bring more peace on Earth, and bring more understanding to our notions of challenge, difficulty, and sacrifice? Because gaming doesn't have to be violent. Gaming could just be a matter of taste. Gaming could just be a matter of inquiry. Gaming could just be a matter of curiosity or puzzlement. It doesn't have to be so intense and gross. I mean, I know that in the past I would at times review video games with this favor that I would have for maybe something like Star Fox or Space Invaders or Galaxian or Call of Duty or maybe some Battlefield game for the Xbox Series S or something. But, where does it stop? And how should we continue? This is definitely my review for Wild Guns for the Super Nintendo, and it is a cowboy flick with shooting errors and shooting disorder. And basically, in order to do well in the game, you have to be very accepting of all unreasonable disorder, even if it wasn't to your purpose for the decision. And with that kind of mark, I don't think that the story or morale of Wild Guns is very high up there in the clouds. It tends to be more in the dirt where the demons live. Especially when it comes to the game's presentation of this illusion that woman exactly equals man and man exactly equals woman. You see, here's the problem with that thing. You know what's the problem? If I would not say that one man exactly equals another man, if I would not say that one woman exactly equals another woman, if a woman would not equal exactly another woman, if man would not equal exactly another man, why would I say that anybody is exactly equal? There does have to be differences in a population, and definitely with categories of academic disciplines such as race, ethnicity, culture, society. Those are not to be determined. Those are not to be described. Those are basically just populations. They are human populations. You can really only describe an individual person. You can only really describe a person. You cannot describe a population. And I know often we have the vain attempt to describe populations, like maybe to describe all cowboys and all Indians and all blacks and whites and Mexicans. But then there's the problem where it's like, then you're assuming that the population matters more than the individual persons you meet in person. And that could be risky because that could damage your awareness of your own responsible witness. Because after all, I think to really describe what life is like, we need to get to know individual persons, as in like person by case, person by person. Population is beyond attention. And so is like the cosmos and the universe and those kinds of things. Kind of like God, Like, would you say right now that you could predict God? Well, no, because you would have to be like, basically like a god to predict God, or in some way, or maybe something greater than God. But we all know that a human is not greater than God. And so therefore a human's not going to predict the universe or the population or the nation or the world and those kinds of things. And definitely too many video game players and political speech hackers spend way too much frivolous time vain attempt at any impossible description of any population. Describing a population is like telling us what you think of the air. It's like telling us what you think of all the mountains that exist on the planet. You can't really be that broad with your generalization. You can only go piece by piece in the little things of what your experience is. And with this review, I am reviewing Wild Guns. for the Super Nintendo, of which I would say the challenge can seem fair considering the historical perspective, but I'm disappointed that games in the future would not take the historical caution of war and peace and improve the future. A lot of gamers seem to have this kind of attitude that that it's okay to declare war, and it's okay and it's okay to fight people just because you're atheist or just because you're faithful to God. But you see, when it comes to that, well, you are changing the scope of where God is in your perspective, but you're not actually changing the evil. You're basically keeping the evil and putting a different creation theory over it. You change the creation theory, but you do not change the evil. That's a mistake. And I'm telling this as a philosopher myself. Wild Guns is an unfortunate case of like those times when cowboys would get too drunk and too illiterate and too dirty, and they would get into unimportant and unresultive fights that lead nowhere. And you can even see in the game that as Super Nintendo features go on the line, the controls tend to end and finish with the proper mismanagement of ignorance and dangerous bliss. And I think it's with this dangerous bliss and with this excessive reliance on fighting that I think in the future we need to change for video games, and we need to figure out how to make peace a video game. Take care.